$10 billion, frozen, overnight. That's child care subsidies, cash assistance, and social services grants, stopped across 5 blue states: California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. The announcement hit on January 6th via Health and Human Services. The stated reason? Serious concerns about widespread fraud. Evidence offered publicly beyond Minnesota's recent scandal? Not much. So let's cut through the noise. What just happened, why it matters, and what it says about power in Washington right now. First, the money. We're talking about 3 pipelines. The Child Care and Development Fund, about $2.4 billion, TANF, cash aid for families, roughly $735 billion, and social services grants, around $869 million. These aren't abstract numbers. They pay the child care provider, keep a parent at work, and cover the basics for low-income families. The ultimatum is simple. States have until January 15th to hand over detailed recipient data for review. Miss it, or fail the integrity test, and the freeze stays.
Good morning and thank you for joining us. We are currently witnessing one of the most significant confrontations between federal and state authorities in modern American history. As of January 7th, 2026, the political landscape in Washington has shifted, and from rhetoric to direct financial warfare. The Trump administration, through the Department of Health and Human Services, has officially frozen $10 billion in federal grants. These funds were earmarked for child care, family assistance, and social services. The targets of this freeze are the 5 specific Democratic-led states: California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. The administration stated rationale is a concern over widespread fraud. They point specifically to recent welfare fraud probe in Minnesota, a scandal so significant it led to Governor Tim Walz dropping his re-election bid. However, the administration has yet to provide specific evidence of similar systematic fraud in other 4 states. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this move. We will analyze the immediate human impact of the legal framework of federal disbursements.
Now the spark. Minnesota. A real scandal blew open there. Massive welfare fraud investigations, high-profile prosecutions, and political fallout big enough that Governor Tim Walz just ended his re-election bid. That story is driving national outrage. But here's the maneuver: tying 4 other Democratic-led states to Minnesota's mess without presenting specific public evidence at the same scale. It's a clever political frame. Anchor the narrative to a solid case, then extend the suspicion. Zoom out. This looks less like a routine audit and more like a power play. The White House is fresh off flexing abroad, and now it's flexing at home, using control over federal disbursements to squeeze governors who have been some of the loudest critics since 2020 and the 2024 race. Supporters call it accountability. If there's fraud, stop the money, force transparency, fix the system. Critics call it retaliation, a selective crackdown that punishes political opponents and the families who rely on these programs. Both things can be true at once. Fraud is real, and weaponizing anti-fraud to settle scores is also real. 1. Executive leverage. 2. Federal-state trust. 3. Precedent before the midterms. If this sticks, expect future presidents.
First, let's look at the numbers, because the scale of this freeze is staggering. We are talking about $10 billion that flow directly into social safety nets. The breakdown includes $2.4 billion for child care and development fund. This program is a primary resource for low-income working parents who rely on subsidies to stay in the workforce. Then there is the $7.35 billion from TANF, Temporary Assistance for Nearby Families. This is the bedrock of cash aid for those living below the poverty line. Finally, nearly $870 million in social services block grants have been halted. The administration has issued an ultimatum. These five states have until January 15th to submit granular recipient level data for every dollar spent. If they do not comply to the satisfaction of HHS, the freeze remains indefinite. In practical terms, this means hundreds of thousands of families are now facing an uncertain future. If the states cannot bridge this multi-billion-dollar gap using their own rainy day funds, services will stop. This isn't just budget line item. It is the disruption of daily lives in the most vulnerable citizens in our largest economies.
To use funding freezes as negotiation starters, not last resorts. When Washington signals it doesn't trust state data, it rewrites the relationship. Governors will lawyer up, agencies will slow walk, families get caught in the gap. If you're a parent depending on a subsidy, your provider wants to know if a check lands this month. If you're on cash assistance, a missed payment isn't a headline. It's rent, food, survival. Legally, expect lawsuits, separation of powers, administrative overreach, and whether HHS followed the rules. Courts may demand targeted audits rather than statewide freezes, or they might bless the leverage. Watch Congress. Hearings amplify the winning storyline, fraud cleanup, or political payback. And watch the families. $10 billion can move votes, shape policy, and redraw who holds the purse strings.
Now, we must ask the question, is this truly about fiscal responsibility and fraud prevention, or is it a calculated exercise of executive power? The timing and the selection of these states suggest the latter. By tying the freeze to the Minnesota scandal, administration has created a veneer of legitimacy. They are using a real instance of mismanagement in one state to cast a shadow of suspicion over four others. Governor Kathy Hochul have been quick to label this move as vindictive and cruel. They argue that the administration is weaponizing the federal purse to punish blue states that have consistently opposed the president's agenda. From a strategic standpoint, this is a masterclass in leverage. By targeting the funding that governors rely on to keep their states stable, the president is forcing these leaders into a defense crouch. They must choose between surrendering massive amounts of private citizen data or watching their social programs collapse. This reflects a broader trend we have seen since the 2024 elections: the consolidation of executive power and the erosion of traditional federal state checks and balances. We saw it with the recent intervention in Venezuela, and we are seeing it now on the domestic front. The message from the White House is clear: federal cooperation is a privilege, not a right. Constitutional scholars are already debating whether the executive branch has the authority to unilaterally withhold congressional mandated funds based on concerns rather than proven violations. Under the Empowerment Control Act, the president is limited in how he can withhold funds that Congress has already appropriated. However, the administration is framing this as a compliance review rather than a permanent withholding. This distinction is key. By framing it as an investigation into fraud, they are attempting to bypass the legal hurdles that usually protect state funding. While Democrats in Congress are vowing legal challenges and investigations, the Republican majority remains largely supportive. For many in the GOP, this move is seen as long overdue accounting of wasteful spending. In liberal strongholds, it plays directly to a base that feels federal tax dollars are often mismanaged by urban bureaucracies. As we look forward to the 2076 midterms, the stakes could not be higher. This funding freeze isn't just a policy dispute, it is a campaign narrative in the making. For Trump, for the Trump administration, this is a way to paint Democrat governors as incompetent and corrupt ahead of the elections. For the Democrats, it is a rallying cry against what they describe as an authoritarian overreach that hurts families to settle political scores. If the courts do not intervene before January 15th deadline, we may see a level of civil and economic unrest in these five states that we haven't seen in decades. Protests are already brewing, being organized in Albany, Sacramento, and St. Paul. The outcome of this standoff will set precedent for the remainder of this term. If the president succeeds in using federal grants as a tool for political leverage, the very nature of the relationship between the states and federal government will be forever changed. We are no longer just debating policy. We are witnessing the restructuring of American governance. We will be following the developments of the January 15th deadline closely as the states prepare their responses in their first legal filing hit the dockets. The question remains, who will blink first? Will the governors hand over the data and risk federal overreach in their state systems, or will they hold their ground and risk the collapse of their social safety nets? The backroom deal era of Washington is over. This is now a front room fight played out in the lives of American people. Thank you for the time today. We will keep you updated as the story evolves.